Dixon Solar LLC's request for a special use permit to construct a solar energy system in South Dixon Township. For those of you listening who may have, of course, you wouldn't be on Zoom if you didn't already have it, but in case you're on YouTube and can't remember or don't have the Zoom meeting ID, it is 915-3923-9154. And the password is 209840. As to YouTube, on your computer or cell phone, use your browser, go to www.youtube.com. In the search bar, type Lee County, IL, short for Illinois, IL, Zoning Board of Appeals. As I always say, no need to be confused with upper or lowercase letters. Find the session date you want, which is presumably tonight, October 12th, and click on it, and you should be seeing us. If, like a lot of us, you are not a complete techno geek, you can call Ms. Duffy's helpline, technical helpline, 815-973-3449. We're here in the old Lee County Courthouse, third floor, former courtroom. I note for the record the presence of the following honorable members of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Its chair, Mr. Forster, its vice chair, Mr. Burrow, Mr. Bothy, Mr. Hughes, and Mr. Meyer. I note the presence of Zoning Officer Duffy, Renewable Energy Coordinator Hinkle, State's Attorney, Mr. Boonstra, Petitioner's Attorney, Ms. Courtney Kennedy, a number of the petitioner's representatives, our court reporter, Kelly, of course, myself, and I would, again, I don't know how many petitioners reps there are. I'm going to guess 3, 4, at least 4, 6, 9, 11, 14, 17. I think there are 8, other than the necessaries, there are 18 people in the courtroom. Interested parties, that is. And on Zoom, Ms. Henkel reports we have 5 people on Zoom. Making tonight's attendance 34 people. Nobody in the back jury, former jury deliberation room. Okay. Very good. And my notes reflect when last we left off. Mr. Smith, Patrick Smith, was on the witness stand, and the petitioner had completed its direct examination. Mr. Smith, if you want to step up and have to undergo the Slavin rule, which means 24 hours have passed, so you have to be sworn in again. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Have a seat where you were before, please. All right, the petitioner had completed its direct examination, so turning to necessaries first, Ms. Duffy. How about Renewable Energy Coordinator Hinkle?
Okay. When looking at the slide,
And for the record, it's slide, can you tell us a page number? Ms. Hinkle?
17.
Page number 7. Do you have that in front of you, Mr. Smith?
I can see it.
Oh, you can see it? Great.
Is a well and septic permit being obtained by South Dixon Solar?
I should clarify this a little bit. We don't anticipate that we need a well and septic permit. Typically, we look into that and we don't anticipate that we need it on this site. If it comes up that we do, we would absolutely get that, but we don't need it with our current site plan.
That is all.
Okay. How about you, Mr. Boonstra? You? Okay, ZBA members, Mr. Forster? Mr. Burrow?
Yes, purpose of our zoning board, is to determine where and if items ought to be entered in the county. And I don't think the question's been asked yet. What's the reason that Duke Energy is doing this in Lee County and not in any other counties?
Yeah, well, what we'd like to say is that the transmission line chooses the project. So you can only build on transmission lines, these energy highways that run through them. So this is identified by the market as a good site for energy. There's a good cost. It's flat land. All of the analysis, curtailment and congestion studies that we do identified this location as an area that was a good location for a solar project.
It's been discussed with various distances. What's the voltage drop on lines as to, it's always been said the closer you are to the city, to Chicago, everything in Illinois deals with Chicago. What's the voltage drop per mile that you have on the transmission lines? Do you know?
I don't know the answer to that.
I just wondered why we're still 100 miles from Chicago and why we aren't building right next to Chicago.
I mean, Chicago takes a lot of energy, but it's not the only place that needs energy. So the further you get from Chicago, if a lot of energy is going there, you would need energy here that's being created there and not being sent this direction. So you would need it all over the place. It's distributed. The grid is distributed. So you need it everywhere.
So, but the question we keep having in our neighborhood is why are we building these on black dirt when we could be building them on sand down at Prophetstown or someplace like that? That's a lot poorer soil that still is connected to the four-legged grid, the PJM series.
Yeah, if there's not a transmission line with capacity on it, you can't build there. So it depends on the transmission lines that run through that site. So if you've got even if you've got a site that can't grow at all, if there's no capacity on that transmission line, you can't build on that line. You'd have to rebuild the whole system and it would be prohibitively expensive.
Okay, that's all.
Mr. Murphy? Mr. Hughes?
Yes, just a couple of questions. One that had been asked previously, but kind of I think got deferred to you a little bit in earlier questioning. Panel life. What's the extent of the panel life?
Yeah, so the panels are warranted at 30 years, which is typically they can go much longer than that. That's just the warranty that the panel manufacturer provides. So 40 years is well within the life of a panel. Not only that, but we expect there to be a useful life after 40 years, whether it's included in the salvage value of our project. In fact, when we calculate it, I know we can't use it for decommissioning, but these panels have, particularly the ones we are buying, which are tier 1 panels. So the cream of the crop, the most durable, the best degradation rates. They have a long life beyond 40 years, which is the intended life of the project.
Okay, let me restate that just for clarification. You
Sure.
said the warranted life is 30 years, but you expect it to have a useful life of at least 40.
Yeah, beyond 40, we would expect the useful life to be.
The other question I had, and we may get into more specifics later, but you did bring up the decommissioning. The decommissioning plan, as I've seen it, talks about the equipment, the structures, and also about the landscaping. I would, just for clarification's sake, I wanted to make sure that that reference to landscaping is relative to the screenings, the screening that's being set up, the trees or shrubs that are set up for screening purposes.
As in, we would remove the landscape screening that we installed for the project. That's as part of the decommissioning. That's correct. That's included in the
Okay.
cost of decommissioning.
You referenced it as landscaping. I thought that's what it was
Yeah.
referring to, but I wanted to make sure because based on the positioning, that may be critical.
And on that, to answer that question and your previous question a little bit better, actually, we talked about salvage value a lot last time, or why we believe that 100% is sufficient as a decommissioning bond. And the reason that is we expect the salvage value of this project to exceed the cost that it takes to decommission it. The steel alone at the end of its life will be worth at least half of the cost to decommission this project. And that's why the AMA decided on 100%, because at the county's discretion, you don't have to include salvage value in that. So really the AMA is saying, in our estimations, 200% of the value, because the salvage, the useful life of the panels and the steel and all the other components is so valuable that there's a lot of, the way the ordinance is written, it would be more like 250% of the value of the project at the end of its life.
All right, that's all I have.
Mr. Meyer?
No question.
All right. Interested parties. I forgot where I started last time, but I'll start in the room. Folks with interested parties in the courtroom, personally present at the courtroom, if you'd raise your hand. And I think I saw Ms. Lawson's hand first. Again, just for the record, introduce yourself and where you live in relation to or work or have a business in relation to the project, proposed project. Excuse me.
Jennifer Lawson, adjacent to the project, excuse me. Many of the residences in the areas do not have cable or rely on satellite for internet and TV. What interference will there be with satellite TV?
Yep, that's covered in the new ordinance, which we plan on complying with. I have never seen any studies suggesting that we would interfere with satellite at all. So we will not interfere with satellite at all. And it's covered in the new ordinance.
Similar to satellite internet as well.
That's correct.
Did you state on 10/7/2021 that there would be combiner boxes as part of this project?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Ms.
Sorry.
Lawson.
How many solar strings will there be per combiner box, or how many combiner box are you estimating for this project?
Each string has a combiner box. Couldn't estimate the amount of strings on that, to be honest, but each string of panels would have a combiner box at the end of it, which is the location that the wires are buried at.
What are the hazards associated with combiner boxes?
It's electrical equipment like a breaker box, but there are nothing inherently risky about it. They're not an inherent fire risk. They're not an inherent, it's at that point, I guess it's important to point out, at that point, it is still very low voltage because it's just connecting the panels. So there are no great risks to a combiner box.
You state on 10/7/2021 that there would be inverters as part of the project.
Yes, Ms. Lawson.
How many inverters per combiner box, or how many inverters do you estimate for this project?
It depends on the technology. I could do the math quickly. I've got a rule against doing math in public, but more than 100 inverters is a ballpark I could give you.
What is the approximate size of the inverters?
Depending on the technology used, between 3 and 5 megawatt inverters. That technology will likely improve by the time the project begins construction several years from now. So this is current technology estimates.
Physical size.
Oh, sorry. Not very big. 10 feet wide, 8 feet tall, 15 feet long, something like that. Again, that's part of the improvements. We expect them to get smaller. I showed a picture on the first slide. Maybe it wasn't it didn't have a great, there's nothing to compare it to, but yeah, maybe 8 feet tall.
Are there hazards associated with the inverters?
No different than any other transformer. And the inverters are monitored 24/7. So we would know if there's anything going on with them. We would know immediately if an inverter had an issue with it. So there's no great hazard associated with an inverter.
What is the decibel average for an inverter?
That is a great question for Jason Cooper, who will be presenting immediately after me. I know that it is below the Illinois Pollution Control Board guidance. And I know that at night, they are not functioning because the panels aren't on because there's no sun out. So very quiet at night and underneath all octave band regulations during the day.
You state on 10/7/2021 that the system will be monitored for output.
Yes,
Therefore, if there was a fire and that therefore there was not a fire concern is what your statement was.
yes.
So how are fire systems and output monitoring the same?
So the system is being monitored. If there were a fire, it would trip a combiner box or a breaker. There would be a difference in the level of output. And we would know which section has been turned off, if that makes sense. So that by sectionizing them with the combiner boxes, we know we can identify immediately where the issue is if there's a difference in output from one.
So it's not truly telling you if there's a fire or not, it's just telling you if there's output.
It would identify an issue.
How will you be monitoring the output of the panels?
One more time.
How will you be monitoring the output of the panels?
So we have 24/7 remote monitoring via, there's technology on the panels and at the inverters. We will have a full-time manned operation there. We do routine maintenance to inspect the panels visually. We do routine maintenance to inspect the panels thermally for things that we can't identify visually. IR is another way that we inspect them. We do quite a bit of routine maintenance on these, we'll be mowing them. And so there are a lot of different ways we inspect the panels.
So these will be Bluetooth/satellite versus fiber cable.
No, often typically we would pull fiber to the site and it would be connected that way. There are regulations that PJM and ComEd, they have to know nearly instantaneously what the output of the site is for the reliability of the grid. So we have to know immediately. So we would use typically fiber.
The fiber would be buried.
I believe so. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Lawson.
So per the proposed location of the industrial solar project, would you say there are still agricultural processes taking place around the site?
Around the site, yes.
Previously stated that the efficiency of the solar panels is only 30% generation, correct?
Yeah, the efficiency of a solar panel is a little bit less than 30% right now, but somewhere in the 20s, and technology continues to improve.
Are you aware of the study conducted by MIT in 2018 in regards to dust and air pollution?
Can I get you to get a little closer to the mic? I mean, all your questions are fine, but I know it's hard. I know.
In 2018, there was an MIT study done in regards to dust and air pollen that adversely affects solar panels by an additional 12% loss.
We have very robust studies on the soiling of solar panels, and I don't know what location that refers to, but it doesn't refer to any sites we have. We've had sites in operation much longer than 2018, and we are not seeing a 12% loss. And that wouldn't be on the efficiency, it would be on the total production of the site. So you wouldn't drop down to, 15% efficiency. You might see, if there's been a month since it's rained, you might see instead of a 500 megawatt output, 10% off of that. So a 450 megawatt output in that circumstance, but we are not seeing that on our solar sites. We do a lot of monitoring of the production. We have a whole team that does that. We, like I said, PJM cares how much energy we're putting out. We have to tell them what we are putting out to maintain the reliability of the grid. Additionally, a lot of old studies like that are conducted where a lot of the first solar projects were built, which is, Arizona, Nevada, places where you are dealing with mostly an arid climate and you have a lot more dust storms. When we have the ground cover, we anticipate significantly reduced soiling is what we refer to it as.
So per the proposed map of the solar project, I counted at least 14 different sections that are actually broken up by roads or tributaries, waterways. So that is a non-continuous array. How will these rays be connected then across the roads and across the creeks?
We would bore underneath a road or a creek. That's part of the burying process. I don't know the specific sections you're referring to, but I could, if I looked at them, I'd be able to identify how we would plan on doing that. It's also, we can move those roads around to make it fit the features of the site better if there are any issues.
Okay, I guess I can't make a comment. It's not feasible because part of it is actually under protection by historical
So
society.
that's telling them things.
Hard not to.
I know, I get it. Asking questions is hard.
Are you aware of the Lee County Comprehensive Plan from May of 18th of 2010?
No.
So there are 3 goals within this Lee County Comprehensive Plan. The first goal of comprehensive plan is maintain agricultural economy in the county by limiting non-agricultural development on prime farmland. How does this meet that goal?
With the size of Lee County, we're not taking up that much space. Overall, the project area is 3,800 acres, but that number is a little bit misleading. There are, very big setbacks. We only use a portion of the site because of the row spacing. It's smaller than that overall. 20% of that is actually paneled.
So the second goal of the comprehensive plan is to preserve rural character and farming lifestyle of the county. How does this project meet that goal?
Yep, as I stated in my last testimony a few days ago, these are the largest setbacks I've ever seen on a project, and we do a lot of these in farming communities. So we've heard from a lot of the community that they didn't think the setbacks were large enough, and we increased them to help preserve that character. And I think solar makes a great neighbor, as we say. I could go through the list of things. There's not shadow flicker. It doesn't make noise. There's no vibrations. It's not hazardous. There's no smell or any noxious fumes or gases emitted from it.
The third goal of the comprehensive plan is to preserve and enhance the aesthetic quality of the county. Do you feel 3,838 acres of black glass, metal, and woven wire fences preserves and enhances the aesthetic quality of the county?
Again, it's not 3,800 acres of solar panel. That only about 20% of that is paneled. There's a lot of open space between those. There are generous setbacks. 400 feet it's bigger than a football field. Now that's a huge setback. We're going to be planting pollinators. We're going to be screening the residences. There are a lot of steps we've taken to ensure that we meet those standards.
Are you aware that this project is proposed and located on the historic Galena Trail corridor?
I am not. That's not my area of expertise. That would be a question for Jen Klingshirn, who is testifying a few days from now or later on in the process.
Are you aware of 1910 and 1926 Code of Federal Regulations, Department of Labor and OSHA?
No.
Did you state on 10/7/2021 that solar panels are made of crystalline silica?
Yes.
Are you aware that the both previously mentioned CFRs for general industry and constructions both have a crystalline silica standard due to it being a cancer causing?
Could you ask your question again? I don't think I understood what you're asking.
So I referred to 1910 and 1926 Code of Federal Regulations for the Department of Labor in OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Both those Code of Federal Regulations actually have a crystalline silica standard that is, because it is a known cancer causing
Well,
substance.
just ask him a question. Are you aware that
Are
they
you
have?
aware of that?
That's not consistent with the research that I'm aware of. It is not considered a hazardous material by EPA. It passes all of the EPA limits on, toxicity, leaching procedures. I'm not aware of that. And again, it's completely encapsulated in glass. So in the event that it were, there's exposure limits on that kind of thing. I have no idea what that data says. It could say you need, 10 pounds of it for it to be a cancer causing agent. There's a lot of information I would need to answer that question.
So in a recent article written on the Dixon Telegraph, it states that the industrial solar plant would power 100,000 homes. However, these homes are not located within this area, correct?
That is a representative amount of that's just how people talk about power. How many homes could this power? It's just a representative amount. The average home uses X amount of energy. So it wouldn't all go to homes, no.
The Lee County would not necessarily find the benefit of the energy produced.
No, that's not quite right. The energy would join the Lee County transmission and distribution system and would be much more likely to be used the closer you are to the solar plant, the more likely you would be to get a green electron. That's not a scientific term, it's my own term, but a green electron, an electron made from a solar plant.
All I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great questions.
Okay,
Thanks.
but sir in the blue shirt. Again, if you'll help us out by stating your name and where you
Mike
live, work, or
Magnifici. Mike
own a
Magnifici.
business. Let me finish. Where you live, work, or own a business in relation to the boundary of the footprint of the proposed project.
Yeah, I'm the neighbor to the southwest.
And your name?
Mike Magnifici on Pump Factory Road. So my question then is more electrical, since that's my background. I'm retired ComEd. The output voltage on your inverter boxes is 34 kV or?
That's correct, 34.5.
Okay, so then the distribution from those boxes to the substation will be on 34 lines above ground with poles?
No, typically we bury those.
It'll be
We'll
buried.
bury those to the greatest extent possible per the new ordinance.
Okay, so that's a lot of cable. Okay, so then your substations then for your transmission distribution, how many are those in total? Was there just going to be one or two or?
Yeah. Yes, technically there are two different substations that are immediately adjacent to one another. One of them is will be a ComEd owned switching station, and then one will be a project substation that just steps the voltage up. It's essentially just a transformer pad, and then there'll be a 3-ring bus ComEd station.
Do you know the location of that at this time?
It should be on the site plan. It's centrally located to the project, set back as far as it can be, but centrally
Okay,
located.
so will there be any transmission lines that have to be installed to make the grid to the ComEd infrastructure?
Uh,
I mean, how are you basically getting it from your transformer to the line?
They're immediately adjacent. So if I were to describe the transmission line, it would be like 0.1 miles because I can't say anything lower than that. So it's literally our substation takes all of the medium voltage cables, steps it up in the transformer, which all it does is cross a fence line. So it's like maybe 100 feet, and it goes into the 3-ring bus of ComEd station, and then that crosses a fence line onto the transmission line another 100 feet or so. Those are
Okay, so
about,
we're not going to see a whole bunch of transmission poles all over our road or
no.
anything like that. Okay, now these transformers themselves, is the noise that they put out as far as the transformer, the hum. You're going to have cooling fans to cool the oil inside the transformer. Has that been part of the noise impact?
Yeah, absolutely. The noise
Because them
impact.
are pretty noisy.
Yeah, so Jason will be able to speak more to the actual, how the study was conducted, but yes, we've evaluated the inverter pads with the transformers and the substation transformers as part of the noise study. And we have to, I mean, those are included in our requirements of the ordinance. We have to include, that's part of the equipment of the site.
All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Great questions.
By raise of hand, Mr. Lawson.
Jamie Lawson, adjacent landowner. Alice, could we get the slide up? I had some questions regarding the slide. Yeah, yep. Starting on page 5. Well, she gets that going.
Don't,
I'm sorry.
only do one thing at a time.
Okay. Okay. Under solar.
For the
currently-
record, this is slide page number, what? Slide number 5. Okay, now you may
Okay,
inquire.
under solar, currently 55 operating facilities totaling 1.330 megawatts. So that would be an average of 24 megawatts of facility. And you're looking to build a 500 megawatt facility when your average is 24?
Yeah, that number is outdated. We can update that, but we have, that Duke Energy just crossed 10,000 megawatts of renewables. So several thousand of those megawatts would be solar. It's more than what's listed there. I don't know what the exact amount is.
And the
But
standout
hang on,
on that.
I'm
Please,
sorry.
Look, folks. Now, come on. You ask a question and then let him answer.
So this is over a 10-year history or more than that, 15-year history, however long it is. When we started, the projects were very small, 0.5 megawatt, 1 megawatt, 5 megawatts. So you can't average it over the time. The past 5 years or more, all of the projects have been in the 100+ range. Most of our projects in construction and the projects that we are developing and the projects we put on the grid in the past several years, those are all 100 megawatt plus projects.
So you're saying that your handouts aren't accurate?
That number is probably slightly outdated.
Thank you. Could we refer to page 6? I'm referring to the yellow dots. I believe that's solar power. It looks like most is solar. I don't see many yellow dots in the middle in Illinois. It looks like they're all over California, Texas. Could you describe the solar makeup or the soil makeup in Texas and California? Would it be more sand or prime soil?
I couldn't tell you a lot about the soil makeup of California and Texas. I do most of my development in the Midwest. So we've done a lot of studies there, but I don't know too much about Texas and California.
Thank you. Refer to page 9. $3,838 acres across 51 separate participating parcels. How many participating landowners do those parcels represent?
I don't deal with the real estate. I'm an engineer. I do design. I couldn't tell you how many landowners there are.
Has the landowner number changed since last year or last year?
I don't know the answer to that.
Who could answer that question for me? Or I guess for everyone involved here.
One of the developers, I think someone that's speaking later, I'd have to ask the team. I don't do the real estate side of things. I apologize. I don't know the answer to that question.
So you don't know if 25 landowners has changed since you were here last?
I don't.
Okay, thank you. Refer to page where we just on page 10, I believe. And I think my wife just answered, she had asked that question. regarding the power for Lee County homes. Is there a way to track where the energy goes, or it just goes on the grid and it goes wherever it's needed?
It's like water in a pipe. You couldn't track up.
Okay.
You couldn't track it.
Thank you. Page 11. The project enjoys broad support in the immediate area of its footprint. Could you describe broad support?
We've substantially increased the amount of stakeholder reach out we've done this time around, and the majority of people we reach out to are supportive of renewable energy. I'll say this isn't my slide. You're asking me questions about another person's presentation, so I couldn't speak to exactly what he was referring to. That's just my estimation of it. Last time there were more supporters of the project here than.
Last time it was described that the supporters were 25 of the landowners were the supporters. And I was just curious if there was more support than that or how.
That's a speech. Just ask him a question.
Okay. And page 16. Six-foot fencing installed around the perimeter, lighting would be minimized and downcast. That's no longer correct either. It's 8-foot fence now.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Page 18. Okay, are you aware when this project, when you guys were to submit the second for your permit, we were told that you would follow, that we were told by your attorney, Courtney Kinney, that you guys would follow the third ordinance when you applied for the permit the second time?
I can't speak to what she said, but we do.
But not, okay. So but you won't totally submit or to go with the third ordinance. It's kind of a pick and choose type deal.
We're required to follow the old ordinance, and we are following the new ordinance with 2 small exceptions that we've outlined.
Okay. So you're not following a third ordinance in whole.
I don't think that's a fair characterization of the project.
So will the third ordinance, all aspects of the third ordinance be followed for this project?
No.
Thank you. Okay. Are you being paid by Duke Energy to be here?
Yes.
Is Tyler Kuhn still employed by Duke Energy?
No.
Will Duke Energy receive federal investment tax credits for this project?
I don't work on the finance side, but I expect yes.
Would they be in the amount of 26% of the total value of the project?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Okay. Will Duke Energy receive renewable energy credits for this project?
It's possible.
And do you know that amount?
No, these things are currently being legislated and they change every day. It would be impossible for anybody to come out here and tell you what the ITC or renewable energy credit system is going to look like when this project is constructed.
Do you know what that looks like currently?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Would this be an accurate description or description of how it currently is? A 500 megawatt solar farm could theoretically generate 4,300 or 4,380,000 megawatts hours of power in a year if the sun shined optimally 24 hours a day for 365 days. Obviously, this never happens. It is assumed that the sun in Illinois will shine at the best angle without rain or clouds, etc., about 15 to 20% of the time. So if you were to assume that a 500 megawatt solar farm generating energy over the course of a year, 17.5% of the time, that would mean that it would generate 766,500 megawatt hours of electricity over the course of 1 year. So if you do the math on that, 500 megawatts times 878,760 hours in a year times 0.175, you would then multiply that figure by the current rate, which is $4. So you would estimate about a $3 million tax return in a year through renewable energy credits. Would that be a ballpark?
No, I don't think there are a couple of numbers in there that I don't think are right. I couldn't do the math sitting up here.
Okay.
The renewable energy credit system, I'm not fully versed on it, but it's different no matter where it is. The 8760 number is not, it didn't sound quite right to me.
That's how many hours are in a year.
I know how, yeah, I know what an 8760 is. I'm saying the number, the production number you came up with for megawatt hours isn't consistent with what I'm familiar with.
Okay. Are you aware how long renewable energy credits last? Or, I mean, are they 15 years?
I don't know.
Okay, they are 15 years, so.
Don't do that, please.
Okay, so if renewable
All you gotta
energy
do is
credits are
ask a
15
question and
years,
wait for the answer.
if renewable energy credits last 15 years and you're receiving $3 million a year, would that be a total of $45 million in 15 years?
That math adds up, but I don't know that those are the numbers, that those are accurate numbers.
Okay. Would Duke benefit from the high impact business tax?
I don't know what that is.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other, you had mentioned local participants, are there any other local participants to the project than the owners of the land that the project will be built on?
I am not a real estate agent. I don't know the answer to that.
Would it be able to obtain a computer rendition from the air of the entire project once completed, rather than a ground view of just a few panels as provided?
Once it's completed, could we take a picture?
No, can we get a, right now, so we can see what it looks like before we vote on it? Can we get a computer rendition of the 30?
Existing conditions? What's the question?
Can you make a computer animated photo of what this project will look like once completed prior to completion?
That can be done. I need to know more about the specifics of your question. I don't, we have an existing condition and we have an SES plan. And what that is it can be done.
Are you able to provide us a picture of what this project will look like upon completion, prior to completion, or prior to the start of the project?
That's something that can be done. We've done photorealistic simulations before.
I know it was asked last time, so I'm asking if it can be provided to us. If it could, I would appreciate it. Are you aware that there's 34,096 citizens in Lee County, but only 25 landowners for this project?
I don't know how many landowners are in this project or how many citizens are in the county.
Are you familiar with the capacity factor?
Yes.
What capacity factor would this project run at?
I'm familiar with what a capacity factor is. I don't know specifically what it is on this project. It's something, doing some math, sorry, something around 30% to 60%.
Could you explain to me what a capacity factor is?
The output of the site, the net output of the site based on how much energy hits the site. Generally, that's probably not a very good definition, but
Would it, for layman's terms, would it be that it produces power 30% of the time? Is that what a capacity factor would be?
no, I don't think time is a factor in it. It might be that's about right. Yeah, 30% is about the energy. If you take the total energy, how much of that is converted? If total energy from the sun on that area, how much of that is converted to energy? That's about right.
So 30% of the time is producing electricity.
Yeah, which is consistent with most other kinds of energy sources. Thermal energy sources burn off a lot of energy and heat. So for example, a coal plant would only be 35%, something like that. So it's on par, and the energy provided is cheaper because the fuel is free.
So the other 70% of the time it would be sitting dormant, completely useless.
No, it doesn't work like that. Over the day, it's got a certain amount. So throughout the day, anytime that any ambient light hits it, it's generating. It's just at its peak when the sun is highest in the sky.
Does it produce electricity at night?
No,
How many hours do you consider nighttime where it's unproductive? 24 hours, and there's 24 hours in a day, so would it be 50%? Would it be 12 hours?
I'd say 12 hours is fair. Yeah, depending on the time of year.
Oh, and then does it produce electricity when it rains, snows, or cloudy?
Yeah, it produces a small amount of electricity when there's ambient light in the air.
Is there ambient light in the air when there's thunderstorms and it's dark or
No,
cloudy?
if it's completely dark, no, but if it's, just a overcast day, there would still be some energy produced.
So 50% of the time, it's 30% efficient.
No, those numbers that's already taken into account.
With the project being just over 3,800 acres and per the 2010 census of the city of Dixon being 5,031 acres, is it safe to say that this project would be 75% the size of Dixon?
Can you repeat those numbers?
3,800 acres and per the 2010 census of the city of Dixon being 5,031 acres.
Is the project area?
The project area would be 75% the size of the city of Dixon, as per the
Yeah,
census.
3,000 is about 75% of 5,000. That's right.
Thank you. Could you, my wife had asked this, could you describe the current character of the land and soil type to be built on?
It's primarily agriculture.
Does it currently have massive amounts of PVC modules present?
No,
Does it currently have massive amounts of polymers present?
no,
Does it currently have massive amounts of aluminum present?
no,
Does it currently have massive amounts of copper present?
no,
Does it currently have silver present?
no,
Does it currently have lead present?
no.
Does it currently have an electromagnetic field?
Yeah, there are transmission lines running through the project.
Does it currently have massive amounts of dual pane tempered glass?
No,
Are any of the proposed properties currently surrounded by an 8-foot high wire fence?
there may be fences. I don't know.
You stated in your presentation that this project will contain all the items that I just asked you about. So is it safe to say that if built, the character of the land would be significantly altered, not only for surrounding landowners, but for all Lee County residents?
I don't think that's fair to say.
Are you familiar with the footprint of the project?
Yes,
Are you familiar with the phrase in real estate where location, location, location?
yes,
If this project is built, would there be room for significant growth in the future just south of the I-88 off-ramp for Dixon for projects like Amazon distribution centers, Facebook, or even the candy factory that was built in DeKalb that would require significant acres of land, 500 or more, to be built and provide a much larger tax base, career jobs for more than 5 to 10 people, thus ensuring that City of Dixon and Lee County can grow and thrive for the next 40 years and beyond?
I couldn't tell you about other projects in the area or their size or their tax base, but I could tell you that we are planning to build south of the city of Dixon.
But what I guess I'll rephrase my question. What I'm asking is, within the footprint of your project, will there be room for growth?
No.
Other growth and, no, okay, thank you. Are you familiar with the Lee County Generating Station that was previously owned by Duke Energy?
I'm familiar with it. Yes.
Okay, is it considered a peaker plant?
I'm not familiar with it in that context. It was, it's not connected to my job at all at Duke. So I'm not connected to it at all, but I think it's a peaker plant.
Yes. Do you know what a peaker plant is?
Yes.
Do you know that its average runtime per year is 50 days a year? when electricity is needed.
I didn't know that, but that makes sense because peaker plants are a very specific type of energy that is not needed all the time. It's different than a base load or an intermittent load. It's only used for quick ramps. So that seems very realistic to me that you wouldn't need quick ramp energy that often.
So
But
with
I
it
can't
only,
speak to this plant specifically.
so with it only running 50 days a year, would it be safe to say there's not a significant need for energy in this area?
No, it's a completely different form of energy that takes a different need on a reliable grid. There are lots of different types of generators that PJM and ComEd take into account to form a reliable grid. All these projects are studied and dispatched at a certain amount. That's all factored into the economics of our project. If we thought it was only going to run 50 days a year, we wouldn't build it.
So is it possible that if this project is built, that the need for that peaker plant would be no more and it would close?
No, peaker plants still serve a purpose on a reliable grid.
Thank you. And my last question, is it true that as this project is built, that several elected Lee County board members will receive millions of dollars from energy renewables, some even becoming multimillionaires?
I have no idea.
Who could answer that question?
I don't know. That's somebody on the Duke team may be able to answer, but that's not my area of expertise.
Will that person be here today or during this process?
I'd have to defer to Courtney. She might be able to answer the question, or Jeff. They might be able to know who could answer that, but that doesn't, I don't know.
Will I be able to get an answer to that before this process is over?
Somebody else can speak to that
So I
somewhere
will
else in
get
the
an answer-
process.
I will get an answer to that before this process is over.
I don't know the answer to the question, so I can't tell you, but you can ask that to
Well,
other
someone-
people later in the process who may know the answer.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other folks in the room by Azer. Yes, ma'am. Come on up.
Martha Johansson, within about a mile or a half mile of the border.
Folks, your cell phones, please. And it's a board member.
We'll let it slide.
No, you get to turn it off too. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Will any electricity be provided to the Lee County except if it is sold to a company that provides the electricity to Lee County?
Yes, it will enter the transmission system near the community. So that would be, no matter who it's sold to, it's being used locally.
Where are your solar panels being manufactured?
There are a lot of different places around the country that manufacture solar plants or manufacture solar panels. A lot of them are made in Southeast Asia, like Malaysia and Taiwan. There's a large plant in Perrysburg, Ohio that I visited recently that does a gigawatt of production. We haven't sourced the panels directly yet, but they could be made Southeast Asia. There's a big push to buy American-made panels, and there is American manufacturing, but I don't know where we're getting the specific panels for our site.
If you must replace one panel or two, does it have to be of the same kind that it was originally?
That's a great question. We will have spare panels on site in storage in the O&M building. So we would try to replace them with in kind, but you don't need to. You wouldn't need to. No, they can be electrically connected together. Different kinds can.
What is the setback or an enclosed residence or an adjacent residence?
800 by 800 foot exclusion zone from the property, from the residence.
800-foot setback from the property line?
An 800 by 800 foot exclusion box centered on the residence. So, or you could say 400 feet in every direct, a 400-foot box in every direction, 400-foot radius in every direction. Does that answer your question?
You don't ask her questions.
Oh,
Just answer the
If
question.
the residence is a little larger, would it still be 400 foot from each outside
The wall, yeah,
boundary?
the outside wall, yeah.
Where is the fence located then? At this 400-foot line?
That's correct.
And the landscaping then would be outside of this?
So long as it was within our project area, yeah. So we wouldn't build landscaping on someone else's property. We would set the fence back further and build the landscaping on our property if that were the case.
If you apply for a storage facility in the future, is there a place now on the property that you're going to set aside for this possibility?
We haven't set aside any location for a storage project. Typically, those go right next to a substation, just so the length of wires are shorter, but we would have to come back to permit that completely separately. There are also a couple of different kinds of storage. Some are distributed around the site, some are right next to a substation. So but we have, I guess, to answer your question, no, we have not reserved a location for any storage on this site.
How many internal roads do you project, or how many miles of internal roads?
I don't know the answer to that. Jason Cooper who prepared the transportation memo, and he'll be speaking right after me today.
And then do you know what the roads would be, how they would be constructed?
Yeah. Typically, we use native compacted soil, so we would just compact the soil where it is. We do a geotechnical study to see if the roads could be driven on if we just compact them. And so based on that study, we may use gravel in certain locations, but we would try to do as much just compacted native soil as we could. There are also other regulations. For example, a utility requires a gravel road to get to their substation. So that would be the only location where I would say we will use gravel most likely, but everywhere else we would try to use native soils where we could.
Is the company receiving any subsidies from the state?
I don't believe so, but I don't know the answer to that question. Not from an engineering standpoint, not from where I sit.
Are they receiving any subsidies from the United States government?
There is the incentive tax credit that Mr. Lawson talked about. I don't know when this project will be built, so I couldn't tell you if we would qualify for that or not, but that is an existing subsidy that the government provides.
Would this be a one-time subsidy or multi-year subsidy?
I don't know how it works financially. I believe it's just one time.
Does the company plan on asking for a tax reduction rate?
I don't know the answer to that.
At what time would the company start paying property taxes?
I don't know the answer to that.
Did you say that there would be 20 feet of grass between the panels?
Yeah, about from pile to pile, so about 20 feet.
Is this from post to post?
Yes, ma'am, from post to post, running long ways. So then the panels would sit on them. So from panel to panel, maybe it's only however long the panels are divided by 2. So maybe it's 18 feet. Maybe it's 16 feet, but something in the 15 to 20 feet of just grass between the panels.
Between the posts of the panels?
Between the posts will be 20 feet likely, but the panels are sitting on the posts and
Right.
extend a little beyond. So if you
Right.
do the math, it's probably something closer to like of just grass, like 17 feet, depending on if they are flat. So at their max extent, at their widest, it would be something like 17 feet-ish. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but that's at their max. Most of the time when the panels are tilted, it's closer to that 20-foot number.
How many posts per acre do you anticipate having?
I couldn't tell you the math on posts per acre. I can tell you that there are tens of thousands of posts on the site.
How many or how much time will it take to drive the posts in the ground?
I don't know the exact time of that. Several months, I would expect, but I don't know the exact, I couldn't tell you the exact timing of that.
What is the decibel level of the posts when they're being driven in the ground?
I don't know the answer to that.
Have any Duke solar energy systems been decommissioned yet?
There are a few of our early sites that have been repowered. So I guess not fully decommissioned, but a few of them have been repowered. So it's partially decommissioned, I guess you could say.
How can you verify that the land will be returned to its original state after decommission if there hasn't been any decommissioned plants yet?
We're required to bring it back to its existing condition per the AMA.
Will Duke Energy be the company that will do the decommissioning?
That's our intent, to own it through the life of the project.
After construction, and other than the 5 to 10 permanent employees, how will the facility promote job growth within the area?
I don't know the answer to that.
Is your lease for 35 or 40 years?
I'm not a real estate. I'm sorry. I don't know the answer to that.
How many panels are required for 1 megawatt of energy to be produced?
So 1 megawatt, the panels are, around 500 watts. So 1 million divided by 500, like 25,000 or something. 20,000, 2,000. I don't know. I try not to do math in public. Sorry.
No, you said 1 million divided by what?
500. 1 megawatt is 1 million watts. Each panel is 500 as a conservative estimate. Typically, they're bigger than that. So that would give you a number a little bit higher than you would find.
Each panel is how many watts?
500, 550, as big as 600 to 800. I mean, they're getting better and better every year. So 500 is the low number.
Will any of these 450 construction jobs be locally hired?
Yeah, typically, yes. Typically, there's job fairs and things like that. They wouldn't fly in 450 people. There would be some sort of local job presence, yes.
What is the largest megawatt facility now in operation for Duke?
Probably 250 megawatts. I don't work in every region, so that's a projects I'm aware of in my region. 250 megawatts. We have projects larger than that in development. We have 1,000 megawatt project in development, several 500s, and 800. So it's a big site, but it's not our biggest site.
Where are these 500 and 1,000 megawatts?
In the
located?
Midwest.
No, pardon?
In the Midwest, Illinois and Indiana.
What kind of land were these facilities built on?
It's same thing that similar to here, they're primarily agricultural.
Do you anticipate replacing most of the panels before 40 years?
No.
Thank you.
Thank
No
you.
questions. Thanks.
Anybody else in the room, in person? Questions of this witness by raise of your hand? All right, I'm going to turn to the Zoomers. People on Zoom, if you don't remember, I'll try and help you refresh your recollection to indicate that you have a question. If you're video conferencing, down at the bottom of the screen, you should see a tab, I'll call it, that's marked participants. You click on that and you should see a list. Included in the list are the words raise hand. If you click on that, we should see your hand on the video screen. If you're just teleconferencing on Zoom, while remaining on the program, on Zoom, on your keypad, go to your keypad and press star or asterisk first, and then the number 9. And we should see the same hand raised. So I await any raised hands, and I'm going to depend on you, Alice. I'll give them like 10, 15 seconds here. No hands. All righty. Well then, no questions from the Zoomers. And what's good time for a break? We'll resume here at, let's say 20 after. And you may step down.
Thanks.
Feel sick, Kelly?
I remember thinking you were young.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Let's resume. Ms. Kennedy, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Judge. I'd like to call Jason Cooper to the stand.
Cooper, you want to step up and raise your right hand for me, please? You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Have a seat. Thank you. Yeah, you got to swallow it. Perfect.
Could we also pull up his PowerPoint presentation? May I proceed?
Excuse me, you may.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Cooper, will you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Yes, Jason Cooper, JASON COOPER,
And where are you presently employed?
Kimley Horn and Associates.
And what does Kimley Horn do?
We are civil engineering consultants.
And what is your official job title?
I'm the Midwest Solar Development Lead for our company. I oversee our solar team.
And so tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I've got over a decade of civil engineering experience focusing in stormwater management, erosion control design, permitting in both commercial and renewable developments. I've worked on over 100 solar projects, ground mounted solar PV projects ranging.
Mr. Cooper, I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell a lot of engineers. Slow down.
I got
This
that.
lady right in front of you, she's trying to take down everything you say. If you go at light speed, she can't do it.
I've been told I talk a little fast too, so I will try to slow down. I've got over a decade of experience in civil engineering, focusing on stormwater management, erosion control design, permitting, entitlement support, both for commercial and renewable energy projects. The past 5 years, I've been mainly focused on ground mounted solar PV design here in the Midwest, including over 50 projects in Illinois and a project here in Lee County.
So it's safe to say you're familiar with solar energy projects in general?
Yes.
Have you been the civil engineer of record for solar energy projects?
Yes, I have.
And how many of those would have been in Illinois?
Over 15.
And Mr. Cooper, directing your attention to the PowerPoint presentation up on the wall, did you prepare that PowerPoint presentation?
I did.
And was it prepared in anticipation for tonight's hearing?
It was.
Are you familiar with the applicant in this case?
Yes,
And that would be South Dixon Solar LLC?
that's correct.
And are you familiar with the South Dixon Solar project?
Yes, I am.
And how so?
We were hired to prepare and or commission the preparation of the zoning site plan, decommissioning plan, landscape exhibit buffer, noise analysis, and glare study.
Did you also prepare a transportation access report?
We did.
We go to next slide, please. Mr. Cooper, are you aware that the original ordinance on solar energy systems governs this project?
Yes,
And are you aware that the Lee County Board recently passed a new solar energy ordinance that does in fact regulate solar energy systems?
yes,
And if I refer to that ordinance as a new ordinance, you'll understand that I am referring to the most recent ordinance.
yes,
And if I refer to the original ordinance, you will know that I'm referring to the first ordinance for solar energy systems in Lee County.
yes,
And that is the solar ordinance that governs this project.
yes,
Are you familiar with the site plan for this project?
I am.
How so?
We prepared it.
And did you personally contribute to the design of that site plan?
I did.
Are you familiar with the application for this project?
Yes.
And how so?
Kimley Horn supported Duke and was part of many conversations and meetings and preparing the documents that we have as part of the application, as well as consulting and other aspects as well.
And so did you personally help contribute to the design of the application?
Yes,
I'm going to hold up a white binder to you. When I reference the application, you understand that I am referring to this right here.
that's correct.
Thank you.
And Ms. Kennedy's holding up a 3-ring binder, white. I think it's a 4-inch.
Thank you, Judge.
Period.
Mr. Cooper, is the site plan included in the application binder?
Yes, it is.
And can you tell us a little bit about how you prepared and designed the site plan?
Absolutely. And I'll try to go slow here because I have to talk really fast in this one. So the first part of preparing a zoning site plan or a conceptual PV array plan is to prepare what we call a constraint space map. So we'll pull together constraints such as wetlands, waterways, topography, soils, parcel information. We'll look through the county's zoning code to put setbacks in there, pull down the FEMA floodplains, basically anything that could be a constraint to the site, and we'll develop what we call the constraint space map, and that'll be the foundation for our solar array. Once we have that, we'll identify areas that we need to exclude and identify a buildable area for the array. Once we have that, we will take the parameters given to us by the developer, and we will maximize the solar array to hit target ratios for the electricity generation while minimizing any impacts to those constraints that we've identified. Once we've got the layout completed, we'll then locate the inverters and transformers throughout the site as far away from the property line as possible, centrally locate those to avoid any sort of noise issues or concerns, and then we'll provide access routes throughout the site as limited as possible, but we do need to provide access to each one of those inverters for maintenance and operation. Once we have all of those components laid out, we'll then put the perimeter security fence in, put the site access as limited as possible to maintain as much of the access internal to the layout. We'll then locate the perimeter access gates. And then the final portion is to do an assessment of the local zoning code to see if there's any sort of vegetative screening requirements. And then we'll look at the participating and non-participating houses and provide screening in accordance with the local code.
Is there a floodplain that runs through the project area?
There is.
Okay, and will there be panels situated in that floodplain?
There will not.
And so any item that you previously mentioned as a constraint is an area you would typically try to stay away from. Is that fair?
Yes.
Next slide, please. Is there a landscape buffer or a landscape plan proposed for this project?
Yes, our team prepared a preliminary landscape buffer.
And is that landscape buffer in Exhibit L to the
Yes.
application materials? And can you please provide me with an overview of the landscape buffer plan that you prepared?
Yeah, so the buffer will be in accordance with the new ordinance. We've specified evergreen shrubs for the vegetative screening that will be spaced staggered rows with the intent to provide 100% screening in accordance with the new ordinance. Those will be at a minimum planting height of 3 feet, maintaining 8 feet at 4 years with a 6-foot width in accordance with the zoning code.
Does the original ordinance have any requirements for a vegetative buffer?
It does not.
Next slide, please.
So these next few slides are zoom ins of the site plan. We're just going to flip through them, but I've got them in the presentation in case we want to pull them up to talk about any specific locations in a little more detail.
Next slide, please. You go to the next one as well. Next slide, please. Mr. Cooper, have you served as the licensed engineer of record for civil engineering design on utility scale solar projects?
Yes.
And can you give me an approximation on how many?
Over 40.
And can you walk me through the industry standard for stormwater management on utility scale solar projects?
Absolutely. So one of the key documents that we reference in regard to civil engineering is an American Society of Civil Engineer abstract on the hydrologic response of solar farms that you can see referenced up here. What that study did is it took and it did an analysis of a few different scenarios and how ground mounted PV solar arrays that are elevated above the ground react with and generate stormwater runoff. It compared existing conditions of ground cover to the same proposed with the panels above that, meaning It compared gravel in the pre versus gravel in the post condition, as well as grass in the pre and grass in the post condition, agricultural in the pre, agricultural in the post. And what it determined was that the impacts to stormwater are negligible, both volume and peak of runoff. A clarification here that for our project is we're doing one better to the ground cover, where we're taking the row crop, which has a lower infiltration or ability for the stormwater to absorb into the ground, and changing that to a managed turf, which has a much more intense root system and allows for stormwater to infiltrate into the ground and generate less runoff. So we use that as the basis for design, but in all of these instances where we're doing solar PV design on agricultural fields, by changing from traditional row crop to a managed turf system, we're going to be decreasing the amount of runoff from the existing condition. In addition to that, during our final design, we do what we call a 2D hydrology study. So slow down. A two-dimensional hydrology study. And basically what that does is it analyzes the scour and inundation, or the ability for the ground to erode underneath the panels, and for flooding localized, even though there's not a FEMA floodplain. There's localized ponding in these sites, and that's not good for solar design. So we'll analyze those and make sure that we mitigate any of those inundation areas underneath the panels.
And so you referenced the American Society of Civil Engineers hydrology abstract. Is that abstract included as Appendix X or Appendix T, I'm sorry, to the application?
Yes.
Next slide, please.
This is just a graphic of what I just explained, just showing kind of the difference in the root structure, and where you can see that the managed turf over the entire ground cover is going to increase the infiltration, help develop a stronger root system, and decrease any sort of sediment or soil loss once it's fully vegetated.
Next slide, please. Did you perform a glint and glare analysis or commission the preparation of a solar glint and glare analysis for the South Dixon Solar Project?
Yes.
And is a solar glint and glare analysis that was prepared for and included in the application materials?
Yes.
And could you please discuss the analysis and the methodology that was used to prepare that study?
Yes. So the tool that was used is the Solar Glare Hazard Analysis Tool, or SGAT. It's a modeling software that's used in the solar industry. Basically, the way that it works is we take our site plan that we've generated, we input the extents of the solar panels, the height of those panels, and the tracking for the panels following the sun from the east to the west. And the model takes your spot geographically on the planet and models 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, assuming full sun for when sun would be shining in that area. It doesn't account for any sort of vegetative screening, any sort of buffers or anything like that. So it's a conservative model in those aspects. And then it generates whether there's going to be any sort of glint or glare, potential for glint or glare in observation points that you input into the model. So the model that we ran analyzed our solar design with the input parameters for the Dixon Municipal Airport runways to be in accordance with the aviation requirements, as well as the adjacent roadways for two-way traffic along those. And it determined that there's no potential for glare based on our current layout.
Is that solar glint and glare analysis included as Appendix N in the permit application?
Yes.
And in your opinion, does the glint and glare study comply with the terms of the original ordinance requirements?
Yes.
And in your opinion, does it meet the requirements of the new ordinance?
Yes.
Next slide, please. Mr. Cooper, are you familiar with the noise levels permitted by the original ordinance?
Yes. 50 decibels.
Thank you. And are you familiar with the noise levels permitted by the new ordinance?
Yes, it's required to follow the Illinois Pollution Control Board's requirements for octave band frequency.
And what are those standards?
They break it down into different frequencies. We had a table of that put into our report, but it's between Class A and Class C lands. There's daytime and nighttime hours that are generated that you cannot exceed for the project.
And did you have the occasion to perform a noise study for the South Dixon Solar Project?
Yes.
Okay. And could you please discuss the analysis and methodology used to prepare that study?
Yes. So The modeling software used is called Sound Plan. And basically the way that that modeling software works is we take our zoning site plan, the location of the equipments that are going to generate noise, which in this case are the inverters and the transformers, where they're located on the site. We take the manufacturer's specifications for anticipated sound levels. I believe a question was asked. Those sound levels are 75 dBA at 1 meter for the inverters and 79 dBA at 1 meter for the transformers. That information is put into the sound plan at the locations shown in our zoning site plan, and the modeling software extrapolates that sound out combined with all of the different equipment at the same time simultaneously and generates a perimeter sound level. What the study determined was that the maximum dBA at the property lines around the project is 42 dBA, which is below the 50 decibels threshold. In addition, none of the octave band frequencies with the Illinois Pollution Control Board were exceeded.
And when you run this study, is it a conservative estimate? Is it liberal?
Yeah, it's conservative. It doesn't take into account any of the equipment or screening or any other topography or anything that could mitigate some of that noise.
And is the noise study that you commissioned for this project included as Appendix N to the permit application?
Yes.
And in your professional opinion, do the sources of noise emission for the South Dixon Solar Project exceed the Lee County or IPCB limitations?
No.
And so just to summarize, would the project comply with the terms of the original ordinance on noise?
Yes.
And is the same true with the new ordinance requirements on noise?
Yes.
Next slide, please. Did you have the occasion to prepare a decommissioning plan for the South Dixon Solar Project?
Yes.
And is that included as Appendix R of the application binder?
Yes.
And could you please provide us with an overview of that decommissioning plan?
Yes, so the decommissioning plan was prepared in accordance with both the Illinois Department of Agricultural's AMA requirements as well as the Lee County zoning ordinance. The decommissioning plan essentially identifies all of the project components that are part of a solar PV farm. You can see those listed up on the screen here. That's a good slowdown. And then it takes and walks through what the process would be to remove those and return the ground back to the existing condition prior to the project.
And is the decommissioning plan that you prepared consistent with and in compliance with the applicable section of the original ordinance?
Yes, it is.
And are you familiar with the new ordinance requirements for decommissioning?
Yes.
And is that decommissioning plan that you prepared, again, Appendix R to the application binder, consistent with and in compliance with the decommissioning provisions of the new ordinance?
Yes, with the exception of the financial surety, which the new ordinance requires 150%. And as Patrick alluded to, will be meeting the AMA requirement of 100%.
Is salvage value able to be taken into consideration under our decommissioning plan?
It is not.
With respect to the decommissioning plan, the original ordinance requires this plan to be updated every 3 years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the new ordinance requires the plan to be updated every 5 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
And are you familiar with what the AMA or the Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement requires?
Yes, it's 5 years, consistent with the new ordinance.
Okay, so what is the applicant's position, to the best of your knowledge, on the time frame in which it must resubmit the decommissioning plan?
We'd be willing to adhere to the AMA and the new ordinance with 5 years.
And if the county thought that it would be better protected having the applicant resubmit every 3 years, is the applicant willing and able to comply with that requirement?
Yes.
Which I have nothing further.
All right. Questions? We'll start with Mr. Boonstra this time. How about Renewable Energy Coordinator Hinkle? Mrs. Duffy? ZBA, Mr. Forster? Mr. Burrow? Mr. Bothy, Mr. Hughes,
No questions.
and Mr. Meyer.
No question.
Okay, interested parties, this time we'll start with the Zoomers. As a reminder, if you're on video conferencing, go down at the bottom, there's an icon, I think that says participants. Click on that and you should see another list that one of which should say raise hand. Click on that. If you're teleconferencing, stay on the Zoom, but go to your keypad and hit star or asterisk number 9. And I'll wait a few seconds here for Alice to tell me if anybody's got their hand raised. All right, turning to folks, interested parties in the room by raising your hand. Yes, I saw yours first, Mrs. Lawson. You're quick on the trigger.
Sign up for
It's the
family.
same record for tonight, so you don't have to worry about it. You're Mrs. Lawson. I can't remember your first name.
Jennifer Lawson,
Jennifer,
adjacent
thank you.
property owner.
Go ahead.
What is the specific decibel output for the inverters?
It's 79 dBAs at 1 meter.
So there are oils contained within these inverters?
That's outside of my expertise. I'll state I'm civil engineer, so I'm here to speak on the zoning site plan, the noise analysis, glare study, decommissioning, and landscaping. The actual equipment and electrical, all that is not in my area of expertise. So unfortunately, I won't be able to speak to the equipment, but everything grounded down, I'm good to go.
Okay. It was stated when Patrick was on the stand to Mr. Magnifici that there is oil contained within the inverters. Will you be doing a spill prevention and countermeasure control permit then?
If there is over 1,320 gallons of oil on there, yes, federally, we will be required to do a spill pollution prevention control plan.
So referring to your page 10 on your presentation. I am going to, the X within that map is the airport runway.
Yes.
Did your glint and glare site configuration, did it take into account that the medevac flight for life flight route is directly over this proposed site?
That would not be a parameter that would have been input into the system.
Will it have an effect glare wise on the medevac flight?
It will not have an effect on the Dixon Municipal Airport.
I'm specifically asking for the flight for life.
I do
Flight
not
path.
know.
Okay. For your decommissioning plan on page 12, specifically states site restoration. Returning the ground, does that include removal of the buried fiber lines that are going to be used for communication?
Yes.
Does it also include the the electrical for conductivity that will be running underneath the roads and the creeks?
It's my understanding that the cables will be removed, but the conduit may be left there and abandoned in place.
Do you have information on that conduit?
I don't at this time.
Is there potential negative effects of the conduit to the environment if it's left in the ground?
We would ensure there wouldn't, that would be part of the final engineering of abandoning it.
That is all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice job asking questions. Raise hand. Anybody else? Hubby, come on up. No, you beat her to it. I'm going to be fair. No, your orange shirt was first.
Did you need me to say who I was again?
No, just name.
Jamie Lawson, adjacent landowner. Are you being paid by Duke Energy to be here?
Yes,
Is the floodplain you refer to the 100-year floodplain?
yes,
Are fences built outside the floodplain?
yes.
What will be done with the property, the farm property that is on the floodplain, but not inside the project?
On the floodplain, but not inside the project. It's my understanding it will remain as is.
Nothing will be planted, no vegetation, nothing will be planted on it. It'll just be bare.
It'll remain in its existing condition.
Will the farmers be able to farm that?
I don't know the answer to that.
When the project fences off a little less than 4,000 acres of wildlife habitat, what effects will the displaced wildlife have on the city of Dixon, surrounding subdivisions, and heavily traveled roadways in the area?
That question I'll have to defer to Jen with the RP, who will be testifying later.
Do you anticipate Duke Energy or a future owner of this project filing for tax abatements that will significantly reduce the 50 million anticipated tax dollars that Lee County is expecting?
I can't answer that.
If this is all real estate tax, will land supporting a solar farm pay more in real estate taxes than land that is used for agricultural purposes?
I can't answer that. Again, I'm just a civil engineering consultant.
Is it true that if the project is built, that several elected Lee County board members will receive millions of dollars from Duke Energy Renewables, some even becoming multimillionaires?
I don't know.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Better raise the hand. Mrs. Johansson, come on up.
Martha Johansson. Why doesn't Duke have to follow the new ordinance instead of the old ordinance when they repetitioned?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that would be for the zoning board.
How many entrances to the site will there be?
Oh, I could count them, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Approximately?
Just don't like to approximate. $27.
27 entrances?
Yes.
Will these all have a padlock gate
Yes.
and a light shining downward at each entrance?
That's not my understanding.
Will there be some wire remaining underground when decommissioned?
No.
You said there might be some conduit remaining.
There may be. So when we directional drill or horizontal directional drill underneath the FEMA floodplain or the roadways, that'll be determined during final engineering. If there's an encasement layer there for the pipe to go in or for the line to go in, that may be there. If it's direct buried under there, then the line would be removed. So that it's a possibility.
How far underground is this wire and conduit buried?
It'll be determined in final engineering. It depends on a lot of factors, the soil, what it's going under, local requirements for crossing right of way. So I can't say that right now.
Is the 42 decibel mentioned constant decibels, or does it vary up to 42?
It varies. That's the peak.
What exactly would be removed by Duke in decommissioning?
All of the project components.
Are there any solar systems that have been decommissioned at this time?
Yes,
Where?
I don't know the exact location, but Europe I know is well ahead of us. I know there's been projects decommissioned in the world. I just don't know exactly where.
But are there any in the United States?
I'm not sure.
That's all.
All right, thank you. Other folks in the room in person, interested parties by raise of the hand. I have one very quick follow-up, and it's because I was kind of motioning you to slow down. I just did not hear, please, your, let me get to my page. Very simply, your position with Kimley Horn, or conversely with the project.
Civil engineering consultant. I'm the solar team Midwest regional lead for Kimley Horn.
Say it again, Midwest
Regional lead.
for civil engineering.
Yeah, for the solar development.
Okay. Thank you, and you may, unless you have any questions, Ms. Kennedy.
Nope, Judge, more of just a housekeeping matter. I'd like to
Sure,
admit,
you may step down, and now that questions have been asked, I will admit both petitioners 1 and 2. You may step down. Ms. Kennedy, do you have any other witnesses this evening?
one more, Judge. I'd like to call Wendy Ryerson.
Person, you want to step up and raise your right hands anywhere where you're comfortable, that's fine. Solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Have a seat. You may.
Thank you, Judge. Could you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Wendy Ryerson, Ryerson.
Thank you. Ms. Ryerson, can you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
I am a certified county assessment official in the state of Illinois.
And how are you presently employed?
I'm the Lee County Administrator.
And how long have you been in that position?
3 whole months.
And prior to your current position, how else were you employed?
I was a Lee County Assessor for 21 years and worked in the assessment office for 35.
And so what job responsibilities are associated with that position?
Following the property tax codes and applying property values to determine the tax estimated assessed value.
And are you familiar generally with solar energy systems?
I am.
And how so?
I served on a committee, a statewide committee of county assessment officers that developed the statewide standard for assessing these projects.
So is it safe to say you're familiar with how solar energy systems are taxed in Illinois?
Yes,
And as the Lee County assessor, were you commonly called on to answer and address tax questions and issues from time to time?
yes,
Are you familiar with the South Dixon solar project?
yes,
And you're aware that it's a proposed 500 megawatt project situated on 3,838 acres in South Dixon Township?
yes,
And are you aware that throughout the testimony in the CBA hearing, that the project is estimated to generate approximately $59 million in property taxes over the 40-year period?
yes,
Are you familiar with the concept of the shifting tax burden that has been going around, especially here in Lee County?
yes.
And in layman's terms, can you tell us what that shifting tax burden is?
So shifting tax burden is a phrase that we use in the assessment world that refers to any time that the tax burden, the real estate tax burden specifically, gets shifted from one class of property to another. It could also be shifted from one type of or one class of individual or taxpayer to another. As a quick example, if the state of Illinois determines that senior citizens should receive a homestead exemption, for example, they pay a little bit less, and that burden, that tax burden, gets shifted to other individuals that would be in the taxing district.
Are you familiar with the acronym PTEL? PTELL?
Yes.
And what is it?
Property Tax Extension Limitation Law.
And what makes a taxing district PTEL or non-PTEL?
The county that the taxing district is in has to have had a referendum to support whether the county wants to be a property tax extension limitation county. Once the county makes that decision, it's not automatic that every taxing district in the county goes to a PTEL district. If for example, in this case, Lee County is a PTEL district, we did have a referendum and it was approved by the property tax, or actually by the voters back in the late 80s. So any taxing district that is 100% within the boundaries of Lee County automatically became a PTEL district. If there's any taxing district that extends, as an example, over into Ogle County, that was not automatically a PTEL district. It would only become a PTEL district if Ogle County had a referendum and it was approved in Ogle County. And then potentially taxing districts that would extend into both counties would be a PTEL district.
And so how does the type of taxing district factor into this shifting tax burden?
So specific to solar, or for that matter, wind projects, the shifting tax burden has come up as a question or a concern that I dealt with or answered a lot of questions about, because unique to solar and wind projects, the statewide standard for assessing these calls for depreciation. So as depreciation is applied to these projects, the question became, would the burden be shifted from the solar project, in this case, to other property taxpayers in the jurisdiction? So that became the question.
And so when you're discussing the idea of the shifting tax burden, what assumptions are made?
There's a number of assumptions. The property tax code has a lot of different moving parts. So some of the assumptions might be that if there's going to be shifting tax burden, that nothing else in the taxing district changes. So no other new construction, no other revalues of anything else. The tax rate is something that changes all the time. So those, again, when you talk about shifting tax burden and try to calculate if there is a shifting tax burden, there's a number of moving parts that have to be considered as to whether that burden is going to be shifted to other taxpayers.
Are you familiar with the term repowering?
Yes.
And can you just tell us generally what that means in the context of like solar and wind?
So repowering is where a project in Lee County, we had a wind project that's been repowered. So the entire project is not decommissioned, but rather they put in or replaced the actual turbines with turbines that were more up to date technologically. So they repowered the project. And in the case of the one that exists here in Lee County, they essentially have the same megawatt capacity as before, but they ended up with half the number of turbines.
And so what impact, if any, does repowering have on that shifting tax burden?
Actually, what happens with the repowering is that depreciation schedule that I referred to earlier, you start over again. So the assessment goes at 100%, and then that depreciation starts again at 100%, and we start coming down from there. So the shifting tax burden, essentially, there is no shift. In fact, the shift could be said to be going the other direction, because at that point in time, we've got a new construction project that goes back on at 100%. So tax revenue in that area gets shifted back to the project and off of the other taxpayers in that jurisdiction.
So with respect to that project, you mentioned that wind project. Did the county ever get to that floor of that shifting tax burden before the repower occurred?
We didn't. In the case of wind, which that's what the project was, that to get to the floor, because depreciation, I didn't define, is set at 4% per year, but it goes down to a floor of essentially 17%. So it never got to the floor before they repowered and brought it back up again. So depreciation hadn't gotten to that floor in that particular case.
And just to clarify, the floor doesn't mean that the developer owner pays no property taxes, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
In your experience as a Lee County assessor, did you have any concerns about significant developments such as this project causing a shifting burden to the taxpayers of Lee County?
I went through actually the math of this to try and quantify what that shifting tax burden was. And in the case of this particular project, the largest taxpayer in this particular project is going to be the Dixon Public School System. Dixon Public School System is a good example of one of those taxing districts that extends over into another county, in this case, Ogle County. So Dixon Public School System is not a PTEL jurisdiction for that reason, because Ogle County never did put on the ballot the idea or the concept of PTEL. So in this particular case, what's happening is the Dixon Public School System, not being a PTEL jurisdiction, they have maxed out the statutory rate limitation. This gets really technical, so bear with me. If you want to think about this in terms of a seesaw, so to speak. So when assessed values go up in a jurisdiction, the tax rate goes down to garner the same amount of money that you needed from the prior year. On the flip side, if it starts going, the tax equalized assessed value starts going down, what happens to get that same amount of revenue is tax rate has to go up. So think about that seesaw effect. Except that there's another statewide statute out there that is a rate limitation. So school districts and other taxing districts have a cap in the statewide statute that says you can only take your rate so high. So again, remember the seesaw, but the seesaw stops at a rate cap, a statutory rate cap. Well, in this case, the Dixon Public School Systems is at their rate cap. That seesaw can only go, that rate can only go where it's at right now. The way that the tax burden gets shifted to other taxpayers is the rate goes up. So if in the case of another project, EAV went down, tax rate goes up, everybody pays the same rate. So if you're residential, you're commercial, you're industrial, you're all paying the same rate. But it can't shift if the rate can't go up. So essentially what's going to happen with the Dixon Public School Systems, because they're at their cap, is they're actually, as depreciation occurs with this project, it will end up just essentially Dixon Public School Systems will have to do with less money. It can't be shifted to other taxpayers because the rate can't go up.
And what about the Amboy School District?
Amboy School District is a whole different animal. Amboy School District is a PTEL jurisdiction. 100% of its boundaries are within Lee County. Therefore, when Lee County approved PTEL, Amboy School System was automatically in PTEL. PTEL ended up slowing the rate increase. And so they have a gap between where they're at now with their rate and what that statutory rate limitation is. So as the EAV goes down, there is room for that rate to go up and that burden to shift to other taxpayers.
And so looking at each taxpayer, let's say in the Amboy taxing district, I mean, can you quantify it? Is it a large amount that they would have to take over time or make up over time? I'm sorry.
Are you talking about like individual taxpayer or?
Yes.
The school system, typically school systems are about 65 to 75% of your tax bill. So that shifting burden, of course, is going to happen a little bit over time. But I lost my train of thought, sorry. Rephrase the question and ask me again, because I totally lost my train of thought.
It was a very poorly worded question. So.
I don't know about that, but I lost it.
So focusing on the Amboy School District, is there going to be a large amount taken on by those taxpayers living in that taxing district over time? Is there any way that you can quantify that?
I don't know that I can quantify it sitting here. In this particular project, how many are even in the Amboy School District, I guess is what I'm not sure about. So I'm not sure I can quantify that.
Is there an appreciation factor that goes into that as well?
There is. The statewide assessment methodology also included an appreciation factor based on the consumer price index. So consumer price index is annually determined, and on average, about just a little under 2%, let's say, over the last 5 years. So appreciation is about 2%, depreciation is about 4%. So there's a 2% offset essentially on average. That obviously will vary from year to year.
And again, this is assuming that the project will never repower over the 40-year period.
Right. And the other conditions, such as there's no other new construction in the area, there's no other revalue of any other type of property. So.
Mrs. Ryerson, has the applicant paid you to come testify tonight?
No,
And has the applicant requested that you testify in favor of the project tonight?
no.
I have nothing further, Judge.
All right. How about you, Mrs. Duffy? Want to examine the boss? Now's your chance. How about you, Renewable Energy Coordinator, Mr. Boonstra? All right. ZBA members, Mr. Forster, Mr. Burrow.
Yes, Ms. Ryerson. In talking about these values changing, it sounds like everything with depreciation, that the values in the county would go down.
Craig.
Anyway.
Nope. You gotta pull it towards you. I know.
Anyway, so what?
Actually,
Now that we got the county administrator on, we can lobby for better microphones.
I'm working on it. I really am. Anyway,
So what offsets the declining or the depreciation of this industrial or this solar farm in future years as it depreciates to maintain the income for the county? Is there anything that appreciates in value?
well, as I said, there is an appreciation factor. So there's appreciation and depreciation. So I'm not sure exactly where you're going with that, but other things that might change are, is there any other new construction going on? Are there any other new projects, industrial, commercial, residential? All of those things will factor into the tax base for a particular taxing district.
But what about your residential housing? Does that change? Is that a factor, or is that individual sales that reflect the increased values?
Right. We're going to follow what's happening with the sales. And in the assessment world, we look at a 3-year trend of sales. So it's not an immediate up and down year by year or month by month, but rather a 3-year average.
Okay, so that helps offset this. Okay, that's what I was getting at. Thank you.
But you, Mr. Bothy? Mr. Hughes?
No question.
Mr. Meyer?
In regards to Amboy that still has room to raise their taxes, can you explain the mechanism for raising their? Can you explain the mechanism for them raising their taxing rate?
Well, actually, because they are a PTEL jurisdiction, PTEL is, again, the property tax extension limitation law. So the way PTEL works is that it limits what a taxing district can request year over year to the consumer price index, or 5%, whichever is lesser. So Amboy isn't at its maximum rate because under PTEL, they are limited each year to that consumer price index. They also, any taxing district that's under PTEL also can take advantage of new construction. So there is a caveat to the PTEL law that says if you have new construction, then you can increase your levy amount. However, if you don't, you're limited to the consumer price index.
Can you explain how the solar farm is assessed?
The standard for solar farms, similar to wind farms, is the state of Illinois determined a price per megawatt, and that price per megawatt, and that's nameplate capacity. That is not what they actually produce for wind or solar, but rather the The rated nameplate capacity is applied towards this magic number that our legislators came up with. And that becomes the full value for year one. We assess at 1/3 that full value. And then after that, after year one, after it's at 100% assessment, then we begin the appreciation and depreciation process. So each year we are given by the Department of Revenue the appreciation, consumer price index rating number, and then 4% depreciation is applied. And we run that out until we get to, again, that floor.
What happens when the solar farm's decommissioned?
If they're decommissioned and actually removed, we remove it and it goes back to whatever class of property it was before.
No other questions.
Thank you. All right, interested parties. I think I did Zoomers first last time. So in person here in the old Lee County courtroom. Mr. Lawson, come on up.
Jamie Lawson. Have you ever assessed a 3,838 acre solar farm in Lee County or any other county?
Nope, I have not.
Were you referring to the Shady Oaks 2 wind repower a little bit ago?
Mendota Hills actually was the first one, yeah.
You might have answered this question with the last question the gentleman asked up front, but why is it that Walmart that sits on why is it that Walmart that sits on 22 acres pays $350,000 a year in taxes? Fire nuclear station pays $26 million in taxes. And this project that sits on 3,838 acres only pays $1.2 million a year in taxes.
The state legislators determined that magic number, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Wasn't a number I requested, but that's where they landed.
Any other folks? Yes, Mr. Hanson.
Did you say that the depreciation is set at 4% per year?
Correct.
So when the solar farm starts at, say, 10,000, then 4% of 10,000 is subtracted for the next year.
Yes, but remember, there's also offsetting appreciation based on the consumer price index. So the example that I gave, on average, if appreciation, the consumer price index is about 2% per year, we apply that first, then we take off the 4%. So the net difference is about a 2% reduction in the equalized assessed value.
If the Dixon School District receives 10,000 the first year, then they would receive maybe 2% less than that the second year.
There's a lot of factors that are going to go into that. Like I was talking about,
From the solar farm.
Yeah, well, again, there's a lot of factors that are going to go into that, but just for the sake of discussion, that's generally the way it would work.
And what is this 17% that you were talking about?
You know, I said 17%, and I'm glad you asked me this so I could clarify. What I meant to say was it takes about 17 years to get to the floor. The floor is actually 30%. So I wanted to clarify that. So in other words, what's going to happen is we're going to take 4% off each year, and we're going to add that appreciation each year. When the depreciation gets down to 30%, then we stop depreciating the project. And the only thing that gets applied after that is the appreciation factor. So legislators built in a floor for the depreciation, but they didn't build in any sort of ceiling for the appreciation, if that makes sense.
I think. So then, once the floor is reached, the Dixon School District could receive 2% more from this solar system?
I think it's fair to say that solar system is going to pay 2% more, yes.
Okay. That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Jennifer Lawson.
Jennifer Lawson. So if Duke Energy is leasing this property from the landowners, who actually pays property taxes? Landowners or leasees?
The leasee. And that's by state standard too, actually. That's what in both wind and solar, what is required by the state law.
Just needed to clarify that.
Sure.
All right, anybody else by raise of your hand, please? If not, gone. You may step down. Thank you. All right. This cord's not long enough, Bruce.
This is a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it. Is any of this solar farm or the whole thing, is it in the TIF? I think it's pronounced TIST. Lee
district?
County's TIF area, or don't you know?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't know.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Now you may step down. Oh, I didn't. Thank you. Thank you. Zoomers. Not forgotten, but I'm going to give you a few seconds. If you're video conferencing, hit participants, then hit raise hand. If you're teleconferencing, hit *9. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
See it up there. There we go. Okay, I'm looking for the raised hands. Okay, who are we looking for? Mr. Ariano?
Can you
Can
hear
you
me?
hear, Mr. Ariano, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, sure can. Go ahead and ask your question, Ms. Ryerson.
Ms. Ryerson, for those taxing bodies that are at their max rate limit, such as the Dixon School District, will there be an initial will there be initial lowering of taxes for those in that taxing body to offset it? Or will that be determined by the corporate authorities of that taxing body when they set the rate?
Yes, that's correct. It'll be determined by that taxing body. Specifically, in this case, for example, the city of Dixon will have the opportunity to decide what their levy request is going to be. But I think it's fair to say that, again, thinking about that seesaw that I described earlier, that when EAV goes up, the rate goes down. And I know, Lee, you can't really see me doing this, but when the EAV goes up, the rate comes down. So initially there is going to be that shifting of the burden in a positive way to all the other taxpayers, because there's going to be lower tax rate applied to all of their properties.
Thank you. That was my understanding. That's all.
Thank you. Was there somebody else? Anybody else on Zoom? Raise your hand. You got a few seconds here to capture my attention. Okay, thank you. Now you may step down. And good timing, Ms. Kennedy. We'll, unless you have a 2-minute witness, I think we'll call it a night. And before I do that, I first want to emphasize to folks that remember the dates we went through last time are just available dates. They are not dates set for further hearings. Of those available dates, I'm going to recess this until 2 nights from now, Thursday night, October 14th, 6 o'clock, also here in the Old Lee County Courthouse, 3rd floor courtroom. I am anticipating after that recessing that hearing, that night's session until Tuesday, October 19th. I'm not, without trying to sound difficult, I'm not willing to commit to anything after that. We'll just have to see what the landscape, how far we are and what the landscape looks like. So I recess until Thursday night, 14th, 6 o'clock here, Old Lee County Courthouse, and anticipate that that night will recess until Tuesday, the 19th. Okay, everybody have a safe 48 hours.